For more, let's turn to Balkan Devlin. He's a senior fellow with the Macdonald-Laurier Institute and an adjunct research professor at Carleton University, joining us from Ottawa. Balkan, thank you so much for making time for us.
Thanks for having me, Natasha.
Let's begin with that dire situation in Mariupol that's been in the headlines for weeks now. And yesterday, Balkan, we were actually reporting that Russia, or Putin at least, had agreed in theory for an opening, a possibility to evacuate all of the civilians, or at least some of the civilians that were trapped inside of that plant. What is happening in Mariupol? Is there going to be an opportunity for them to get out?
I wouldn't put too much credence in what Kremlin says. We know Putin lies, and he lied before. And the previous attempts to get civilians out from Mariupol and other places, even with the good offices of say the Red Cross, those humanitarian corridors have been bombed by Russia right after they agree to provide that. So unless and until we saw those people, the civilians in Mariupol, being transported out to Ukraine, not to Russia, as Russia have been forcefully removing people from Ukraine to Russia. I wouldn't necessarily believe until I see actual evacuations happening and those people are safe.
Let me ask you about the situation we saw a few days ago in Kyiv. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is taking a tour with President Zelensky, and just hours after that, there are attacks on the capital that hadn't been occurring for a few weeks at least. It shook people to their core, and many believe it was a direct response to what he was hearing coming out of those conversations between Zelensky and Guterres. What do you make of that?
I mean, I think there's two possibilities to that. One, we will see and we will continue to see Russian airstrikes, both missile strikes and airstrikes, in all parts of Ukraine as a part of a terrorizing strategy to basically, remind Ukrainians that they will not be safe in a part of the world, in a part of the country, despite the fact that the operations in the north failed from Russia's perspective, and they had to focus on the south and the east. And the second is, of course, it might very well try to create saber rattling and try to prevent the West from supporting Ukraine.
Let's talk about Russia's approach further afield. There's been a lot of discussion around Moldova and the possibility of the Russians having a degree of influence there, particularly with the breakaway region of Transnistria. And then also in the week, we had the discussion around Russia cutting off natural gas supplies to NATO members, including Poland and Bulgaria. So I wonder, what is Russia trying to indicate to the United States, to NATO, to the United Kingdom? What is it saying? That it has a sphere of influence, or that it plans on winning? What do you make of these actions?
I think a few things. It shows that Kremlin tries to find ways to lessen the impact of the battlefield defeats that they are facing right now. I mean, they lost the battle in the north, trying to focus on the south and the east and trying to encircle Ukrainian forces. So far, that offensive stalled. They are, experiencing heavy casualties. By all reports, the morale is low. They just lost the 10th general in the war, which is a staggering number. So there are things are not going well for Russia. So they try to rattle the cages and trying to basically posture and try to scare off the West, saying that we could do damage in other places and we have other leverage against you. I see that as an attempt in that sense, try to minimize Western support and try to at least stem the flow of Western support to Ukraine, because things are not going well for them on the battlefield. I don't think they will be successful in this. Moldova, yes, there is a political interference, but the military forces there are not, Russian military forces in Transnistria are not sufficient to provide any sort of offensive operation. The cutting off gas to Bulgaria and Poland, they're not, cutting gas to Germany, for example, as the primary market. So it is more of, desperate attempts by Kremlin, in a way, try to create some political leverage against the West, because things are not going well for them on the ground in Ukraine.
Let me ask you about what's happening in Washington and President Biden asking Congress for $33 billion to send more aid and weapons to Ukrainian fighters. It is an astronomical amount of money that he's asking for. And I wonder, for some, $33 billion could do so much good at home. Not that the Americans don't have to get involved, but at what stage is it more economical to get NATO involved than to be sending over money and resources?
First, I think it's a huge amount. I mean, I think the whole Ukrainian defense budget is about $24 billion or so. So it is a very significant amount of support. The second thing is that there is no sort of a budget or a bank account that NATO has and that one can draw from it. It is the resources of the NATO member states that are providing this. And as the United States is a NATO member, they are providing bilateral mechanism. Even through NATO, it would have to come from individual states. Countries like Estonia, for example, and Poland are providing, compared to their GDP, significantly more than what the Americans are providing. I'm not saying that it is a small amount, like I said, it's a staggering amount. But given the size of the U.S. Economy and GDP and military spending, it is, compared to say what Estonia is providing or Poland is providing, it is not that great. So there is no sort of a pot of money out there that belongs to NATO and that can be provided, or the military involvement of NATO would make things cheaper. This, I think, is one of the best ways the West can support Ukraine, by providing military support, by providing weapons, ammunition, and financial support to get more, so that Ukrainians continue to defend not only Ukraine, but also broader European and Western security in the face of Russian aggression.
Balkan Devlin is a senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, speaking to us from Ottawa. Balkan, thank you.
Thanks for having me.